Hear all about the Camino de Santiago. Karlin and Eric Krebs will discuss their recent adventure walking the 900 kilometers of the Camino de Santiago from the French side of the Pyrenees all the way to the Atlantic. Why did they do it? What did they see? What did they learn? Let's see if we find out. Let's give a warm forums welcome to the amazing Krebs team, and we're looking forward to your adventure.
Brett, you set the bar a little too high there. Thanks everybody for coming. We're going to do a tag team here presentation, a little audio, a little video, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I'm going to start with my personal feeling of doing the Camino de Santiago. It was the greatest thing I've ever done in my life, short of marrying this fine woman here. It is an experience over many days, over many miles, with many people of many countries, seen many things that we had all experienced for the very first time. And it was absolutely a fantastic 44 days. For you English speakers, that's 575 miles in 44 days. Little spoiler alert.
Where are we not? How do you know that? We are at the end of the world. Woo!
The end of the world is the town of Finisterre on the Atlantic coast, which is the exact opposite side of Spain from where we started. And that 0 kilometers means we've completed not only the Camino de Santiago, but the extension from Santiago de Compostela all the way to the Atlantic. That was in the town of Murcia, which is a town in northwest Galicia, which was essentially our last day, our final point of walking across Spain. Before we start, Karlin's going to hand out some stuff so you guys can look at some of the documents and things we earned and managed along our hike. For you online, you can see pictures of them. You probably can't really see them, but I'll describe them. The goal of walking, or one of the goals, one of the outcomes of walking the Camino de Santiago, when you arrive in Santiago de Compostela, is earning something called the Compostela. It's their certificate of completion issued by the Cathedral of Santiago under the auspices of the Catholic Church. There's 2 documents floating around you'll be able to see. One of them is actually the Compostela, which is written in the original Latin from when the Camino initially started almost 2,000 years ago. And the other one is the certificate of distance walked. And that would be from our starting point, we'll get to that in a little bit, all the way through Santiago. Probably more important to Karlin and I are these little documents she'll hand out, and she's showing you right now. We call them the passport or the credencia. When you walk the Camino de Santiago, every day you get a stamp in your passport. It could be from where you ate, it could be from where you slept, it could be from a store you visited or a church you visited. And that is our permanent record of every place we visited along the Camino. In fact, there were so many places we had to have 2 passports each to fill in all the stamps. And that really, please take care with those. Those are really prized possessions, because that's what we get to go back and look at and remind ourselves of the experiences we had each and every day while walking the Camino. A little bit of history, and you can read all this stuff on the slide. Camino de Santiago is also the Way of St. James. This is all about the remains of the Apostle James underneath the cathedral in Santiago. There's all kinds of legends, and I don't want to get into too much of the religious aspects of walking the Camino, because neither Karlin nor I walked this for religious reasons. We'll go through our reasons later. But the whole reason the Camino exists, dating back thousands of years, was the pathways all of the people who walked to Santiago took to go pay their respects to the burial site of the Apostle St. James. There's lots of rumors whether all of St. James are there, part of St. James, only St. James Head, or any, but there is a church there that is eye-wateringly beautiful and eye-wateringly huge, that houses what is allegedly his remains. This path has been walked for thousands of years. What to me is really interesting is what's happened in about the last 40 years. There used to be several hundred pilgrims a year walking this until the mid-1970s, when the Catholic Church and Spain started really kind of advertising this as a pilgrimage. This past year, the year we walked it, a smidgen under 500,000 people walked the Camino de Santiago. Not the whole way. And we're going to show you the routes and stuff in a second. But that means at one point, the totality of 2024, 500,000 people put their feet on the pathway of the Camino de Santiago. And it is a World UNESCO Heritage Site. Most of the paths are. So there's all of the Camino de Santiago is not a single path. There's actually 11 of them. About 5 of them are pretty well known, and there's alternate paths. The one that we walked is in green. You can see where Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port was our starting point. That is in France. That's on the east side of the Pyrenees. And it cuts through the heart of northern Spain on its way to Santiago. There's a northern route. There's a route that cuts up through the heart of Spain called Viaje de la Plata. And the one that's becoming more and more popular with walkers is this Portuguese route, climbing up the coast of Portugal before it enters Spain, ending up at Santiago. So those 500,000 people are not all walking the same path we did. The numbers that I've seen are roughly 55% of people walk along the Frances, our route. And why do you call it Frances? Because it starts in France. And why does it start in France? Because many, many years ago, a guy named Napoleon used this route when he tried to conquer the Iberian Peninsula, really aimed at Portugal, the resources that he wanted to control, but he had to cross Spain, and the route that his army took has now become the French route of the Camino de Santiago. You always walk to the west. Camino Santiago de Compostela is about 75 miles from the Atlantic coast, is where the cathedral is that houses St. James' remains. We extended our walk and we went all the way to the Atlantic using to the towns of Finisterre and Murcia. We went the green route.
Yeah.
Side note, I want to walk the northern route this coming fall, and I'm trying to convince her to come with me. And we are going back to Spain for 3 months in the spring. I don't know if everybody knows, we have a son who lives in Barcelona. So we have visited Barcelona quite often, but not all of Spain. And we've always gone there as tourists to see our son and to see sights. And this time we want to actually spend 3 months and kind of think of what it would be like to live there. While we're there, she gets to go to London with a friend. I'm probably going to walk this short route called Camino Primitivo, which goes up high over the Cantabrian Mountains and rejoins the French route in the town of Melide, if the ankles hold up. There's kind of a zoom in of the route we walked with the major cities along our route. Pamplona, running of the bulls, everyone's familiar with that? They weren't running when we were there, thankfully, because we were wearing those packs. And I'm not sure we would have outrun a dog, let alone a bull. Here's a good point to mention. Back on the first slide, you saw the symbol that is in the upper left. That is the symbol of the Camino. It's also representative of a scallop shell. Rumor has it, early pilgrims carried scallop shells with them so that at any time they come to a river or a stream, they could quickly dip in and grab a drink of water. And since that time, it's become the symbol of the Camino. So everywhere you go on that route, through the towns, in the country, there is signage that contains the scallop shell. Also, I guess, let me think of this slide and then I'll do the next one. Spain is not homogeneous by any stretch as you cross it. This map is not to the same scale, apologize, as the other one. Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port is just above Basque country. The Basque people actually overlap with part of Spain and part of France. But our route came through Basque country, Nevada, La Rioja, Castilla y León, y Galicia. And I don't have a list. Galicia is pronounced Galicia. Everybody in that part of Spain converts a C or a Z to a TH. And I say that, I bring that up because just like in our country, the folks in Tennessee don't speak the same as the folks in Minnesota, nor do they do here in Spain. There are different dialects, there's different diets. We did a lot of countryside. There's different crops, there's different animals, different farms. Rioja is the principal wine region of Spain. We walked through days of just absolutely gorgeous vineyards as far as the eye can see. Fantastic. Castilla y León is mostly what we call the Meseta, and we'll get into a little bit of that in a little bit. Any questions so far before I let Karlin take over? You're up, kid. That's so people online can see.
Okay, so why did we walk the Camino de Santiago? Some of you may not be aware of this, but we lost two of our adult children. Our son Sam, at age 24, passed away in December of 2016. And then not even 6 months later, our daughter Laura passed away at age 29 in June 2017. And so with the grief and the depression, everything that you carry with you when you lose someone or two, any big tragedy, big loss, it's a lifelong of healing and going forward. And I think we found out about the Camino in around 2019. And we were at our son's place in Barcelona, and one of his friends had walked the Camino, and I think we had kind of heard of it, and then we thought, wow, okay, we're gonna have to do that. And we thought about doing it at that time, and then COVID came. And so that caused us to have to kind of put that on hold. And then I was still working full time, and actually Eric was still working as well. So it really, work wasn't conducive to us taking the kind of time off that we needed to be able to do something like this. So I retired, yay! In April of this past year, 2024, and the next day, Eric had all the plans already written out in terms of the training. And we started the next day, walking 6 miles a day, at least 5 days a week. And then every couple weeks, we increased our training by a mile. And we got up to 15 miles over the summer months. So our training was about 5.5 months. And we really wanted to make sure that we would at least have the endurance to be able to do this and have our bodies would be in condition. And I feel like we trained really, really well. And that was a huge part of our healing as well, just walking around Duluth together and going camping and walking all the trails and seeing Minnesota and some of Wisconsin and some of Michigan, a lot of the North Shore, some of southern Minnesota campground areas, but we live in a beautiful state too. And we got in a beautiful city, and walking 15 miles in Duluth several times a week, you really get to see a lot of this town, and what an incredible place to walk just around here. We have little bricks down on the lake walk with our kids' names on them, and then we have their area in Forest Hill Cemetery as well. And so we would often try to hit those spots at different points and visit them along the way. So we wanted to honor our children. We wanted to carry their ashes across the country, which we did as part of our healing process, and to kind of jumpstart, I guess, our healing process in terms of being stronger in spirit and mind and body, which goes into the spiritual growth part of it as well. Making a journey, a physically demanding, a mentally demanding journey, and living in the moment, experiencing moment to moment that experience. So we wanted to reset our lives. We've seen a lot of people get very sedentary when they retire, and with demanding careers, we felt like we were kind of not as physically and mentally healthy as we should be. So we really wanted to do something that would really kind of make us be physical every day. And we knew that when we were done, that we would be in much better shape and have much stronger bodies, which we definitely feel that we do after doing something like this.
Easy to gain the weight back when you stop, though.
Yeah, Eric, for those of you, Eric said it's easy to gain that weight back. Yes, after you're done with something like this. And we wanted to see and experience Spain on foot. We wanted to walk through history and just see it up close, and to do something like this day to day and see all of Spain is so old. It's so much older than our country is in terms of the buildings, the architecture, and the people that were there. It's hard to imagine that Spain has been around with people living in it and building things and so forth, you know, for 4 or 5 times the age of our country, and even then some. So, and there's so many physical structures that are very, very old there. Everything is built out of stone, and it just sticks around. And then we wanted to unplug from our busy society, all the noise. And for us, this personally, this whole election cycle was just very stressful for us. And we wanted to get out of that. And we voted early, and we didn't have to worry about voting. And we just wanted to unplug from noise, from media, from cars, from cities, and just kind of be out in nature. We met a lot of just amazing people on our walk, ranging in ages from literally from us finding out their ages. We documented age 23. That was Ollie from Australia, a guy who walked a couple days barefoot. amazingly. And then a woman, Christina from France, who actually walked a lot farther than we did. She had started in France and had already done
30 days.
30 days prior to starting the Camino. And interestingly enough, on our last day when we finished, we bumped into her and gave her a big hug in Santiago. So yeah, she went a lot farther than we did at age 76. We saw a lot of female solo walkers. Amazingly, it's a very safe route. And we estimated about 60% of the walkers were female and 40% male. This first row, Australia, South Korea on down, is where we noticed that the majority of people we bumped into were from, but not every country is listed here, but we tried to document what we could remember when we were doing the slide. We met people from all over the world, and that just made it so interesting to be able to hear all these different languages. And the common language was Spanish, because everybody had learned a little bit of Spanish, so you could kind of communicate somewhat by speaking Spanish. We seem to see an inordinate amount of people from Australia and a lot from South Korea. And we were wondering why so many young people from South Korea were on this walk. And we found out at some point that they get college credit for doing a semester on the Camino, which I commend South Korea for doing that, because to be able to do a long walk like that as a young person, to be able to reflect on your life and be out in nature like that, it has to have a real positive, transformative effect, which it did for us, for sure. Let's see. You want to play it first?
Play it first.
Okay, just. So that was our first day in Saint Jean Pied de Port. We slept in an albergue the night before. An albergue is the name of what's called the youth hostels that you stay in. I think in France, they probably call them alberges. But in Spain, you call them albergues. And we're heading out at 6:15 in the morning in the dark down this cobblestone street and heading out through the arches there to head out onto the trail. Very exciting day.
Not much sleep that night.
We didn't sleep very well that night, but we were very excited to get started. And this one here.
That down there is Saint Jean Pied de Port. We can tell because there's two red dots in the distance that are our main buildings in the commercial side of the city. So we've walked all the way up from there. I think about 6.5, maybe 7, could be even 7.5 miles by now.
So we're partway up the mountain at this point, and we're looking back down over the Pyrenees mountains there where we came from. And as Eric pointed out, that was the little spot where we had stayed prior to starting. So that first day was just such an amazing day. I hope I don't lose it here. All the training and the excitement of the trip. And you're kind of wondering too, am I going to be able to do this? The first day on the Camino, going up the Pyrenees, making that cross, is considered to be one of the most challenging days of the entire Camino. And we were told if you could do that day, you could do the whole thing. So what do you mean if you could do that day, right? So even with all the training, there's a certain level of anxiety that am I gonna be able to do this? And also just the excitement of being there and getting started on this big journey. So it was just such a beautiful day. And I will say also, we didn't know if we were gonna be able to cross over the Pyrenees, and we really wanted to. We had to kind of prepare ourselves mentally that we might not be able to cross over because it is often closed, especially the time of year, and we left October 13th. It's often closed because of weather events and high wind. And it just so happens that they did have to close it in the days surrounding the day that we did walk it. And one of the days that they had it open, I think it was the day after or 2 days after that 2 days after that we walked it, they didn't close it, but it ended up that they had 11 people had to be rescued off the mountain because of high wind and rain, and people had to stay in these emergency shelters up there, and it wasn't pleasant for them. We bumped into some of those folks, and it was pretty scary for them. So we were feeling incredibly grateful that we were able to cross it. And that first day was everything we had hoped for and more. I mean, it was just an absolutely exhilarating experience. It was windy. And it was just so beautiful. As I said, we started in the dark, but it was a very clear night, and we could see all the stars brightly. We could see Orion's belt. So we were walking up in the dark with this beautiful starry sky. We would hear things at some point. I remember hearing an animal in the dark. I hear this breathing and stirring. So we had on these little headlamps, and we looked about 3 to 4 feet to our right was a big cows with great big horns in the dark, just hanging out. So it was just, seemed like it was absolutely magical. That walk in the dark and then walking up the mountain, and just so beautiful. All the colors, all the greens, the livestock, as you saw on that last slide along the way. It was just an absolutely exhilarating and fulfilling time going up that mountain.
Just a few stats. Day one was just under a 17-mile hike with a 5,000-foot elevation ascent to the peak and a 2,700-foot descent into the first town. And as we both have reflected, as hard as that ascent was, the descent was harder.
Yeah.
Because most of the descent was not on a path. It was in a washout with loose rock, about maybe a 15-degree grade, and 5 miles of that. So you're tired. The adrenaline has come and gone from the climb and the beauty, and you still have 5 miles to go down long, loose rock washouts. It's very memorable. It didn't fall the whole time.
Yeah.
It's fast.
Tons,
Yeah.
tons.
No offense, please.
I'm sorry. There we go. So these slides are just kind of a collection of slides encompassing the first 3 days of our adventure. That first slide is the sunrise, actually, on day one. And the one in the bottom left is at the top of the mountain. Eric and I stopped to just take it in and have some snacks up there. And then I love this picture in the center. Just looking back, that was partway up the mountain, looking back at what was behind us. And it was just so beautiful. It was just so beautiful to take it in. All the colors, just all the greens, the mountains, and the sunrise, and it was just really something. The one in the upper right is in Pamplona, and that's our Australian friend Helen, who we met at the end, at the dinner the first night. Just absolutely delightful woman who we walked a lot of the way with. She didn't have enough time off work. She was also a nurse. I'm a nurse. She's a nurse. A lot of people we ended up walking with ended up being nurses, funny enough. And we went to this restaurant in Pamplona together, and it was a great experience. Kind of far out.
I want to interject. Karlin was mentioning the albergues. Some of these albergues, these hostels, are located in ancient structures, 1,500 years old. The first night after that big climb and drop, we stayed in a 1,200-year-old monastery that had been converted to an albergue. And it was the only place in town, so it had a lot of beds, a lot of people there. The part of the process of staying in an albergue is they got to kick you out so they can make room for the next day's batch to come in. So at 8 a.m. sharp, you're getting out of there. The coolest thing about that albergue, being an old monastery, was at 7 a.m. the lights came on. We were already packing, we were nervous and ready to go. And at exactly 7 a.m., the Gregorian chants from the monks of the monastery in the courtyard of this albergue started singing. That's like the greatest alarm clock ever.
So we took about 2,500 pictures. And so this is just kind of a small little sampling of, of our trip. But this one on the upper left, these are called babosas, these slugs. They're these really big, black, fat slugs. And we didn't see a lot of them, but we had heard about them, and we just wanted to show you that for two reasons. One, to see one, and the other reason is that we felt that we were kind of slow walkers, and for a while we were calling us las tortugas, which is turtles or tortoises walking slow, and we would bump into people, they would pass us up, and we would see them the next day, and then they would pass us up. We would leave early, but then they would pass us up. So then at some point we decided, no, we're even slower than tortoises, we're slugs. So, so we were calling each other the babosas. So, and we were telling other people that as well.
We still haven't made up our t-shirts for that.
So the one with me in my backpack, and I noticed there's a lot, I'm representing these pictures a lot more than Eric is, because we only had one camera, and Eric had it because he was doing the navigation, because Eric's phone completely died, went kaput on day 5. And when we got to a city, we tried to revive it, and that was not happening. It was dead. And you can't just go out and buy a new phone in Spain, because then you'd have to have a Spanish number. And so it just wasn't that easy. So luckily enough, we had my phone. So that was our one phone, which had our maps. And so Eric's taking a lot of the pictures. So I'm in a lot more than he is. I feel kind of bad about that. But this is representative of kind of what we saw a lot of the time. You know, you could see mountains and hills out in front of you, and this path just going on and on out in front of you. And big sky, big clouds. I never had such an appreciation of clouds as I developed on this trip. They were just so beautiful and so amazing. Just dramatic. Down on the right, and the two bottom ones on the right, that's a church and monastery in, let's see, where is that place? Estella, okay. Estella, which means star. Is that right? And they have, in that monastery, they've got a wine fountain, Fuente del Vino. And so, and that is to refresh the pilgrims along the way. You're really, some people are like filling up their water bottles with wine. You're not really supposed to do that. But the tradition is you use your shell, little white shell, which we did use those shells to fill them up with a little bit of wine.
Getting a bigger shell before the next trip.
That was pretty cool. And Eric is going to talk to you about the Meseta.
So I'd mentioned in that map, the central part of Spain is known as the Meseta. If you remember the towns that were on that route, it starts around Burgos, which is a major city, and ends around León, the last major city before you get to Santiago. The Meseta is the high plain of Spain. It's not always flat, but there are small mesas, small buttes along the way you get to climb up to, and by its nature, being imperfectly flat, you can see for miles and miles and miles. There was a couple places along the Meseta which were really stunning in that as you climb up to one of these buttes, which might only be 100 yards long, you could look back and see where you've been for 3 days, because you could see almost 45 miles. And you go to the other edge and you could see where you're going to be for the next 3 days, because you could see almost 45 miles. You were high enough up over a low, extendedly long valley. There's a couple pictures there. Again, in the upper left, we spent a lot of time walking with 2 Australian women. One was Helen, Karlin mentioned. This one was Angie, amazing woman, also a nurse. We spent about 5 days walking with her. You get on the right side of the slide, you get some of the views that we saw, and these pictures don't really give you the depth and the feel for how far you're seeing, but a sense. And then the other one, Karlin mentioned we brought Laura's and Sam's ashes with us, and part of our process was to lay some of those ashes along the way. With the exception of Santiago, which was a planned site where we wanted to put some ashes, everything else was kind of a on the cuff. We'd see something, or we'd be walking through something, and we just look at each other and go, this is a spot. This is the right spot to lay some ashes. And this was at the top of one of those buttes, this cross. You don't hear that? And that's a much longer video. That is a much longer video. We don't need to go through them all, but that is kind of representation of what we do. We'd stop, we'd have a quiet moment. We had, sounds really bad, but we had prepackaged small amounts of each of our kids' ashes, so we could just at a moment's notice say, that's the right spot. One day it was just a tree. We were walking, I can't even remember towards what town, and it was all conifers as far as the eye could see, and one maple on this path. And it was at the end of October, and it was beautiful red and orange, and we just looked and said, that's a spot. And that's how we treated the ashes. One of the other really cool sites called Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross. This was a few days out of Leon. The 26th day we were walking. This is a known site. You meet or you hit on the Frances only. The importance of this site is a place where you carry a stone throughout your entire journey. And that stone can represent a loss or a burden or a special person or a special thing that matters to you. They don't, we add that second part. Mostly it's about burden and loss because this pilgrimage is about healing. The Cruz de Ferro is a place where people have been depositing stones for thousands of years. In that upper left shot, it's hard again to get the sense of how big this thing is, but that whole rise up to the cross is built of the stones people over the last 1,000 years have deposited as they passed the Cruz de Ferro. Before we left, Carl and I think 2 weeks before we left, we took a whole Sunday and we decided what rocks we wanted to each carry as a representation. And of course, if you remember Karlin talking about why we walked, we each had our own stone for Laura and one for Sam. I carried an additional stone down in the bottom right. SP, I lost my best friend in the Navy to cancer. Right around the same time, wasn't it? I think it was around 2016 as well. And then our beloved dog got a stone, Vader, who some of you have met. He got a stone. And why don't you tell them what your stone?
Yeah, and so these stones are really personal to the person, you know, they represent, and they don't even have to completely be said at any rate. It's really a very personal thing, but I had a stone for each of the kids. And you can hold these stones in your pocket. I had them in my pack for some of the time, in my pockets for some of the time, and you can kind of feel them and be thinking about these stones and what they represent to you. And that way folks online won't just see my eyeballs. And also I did one for our family because we have our son Matt, and this is about our family being stronger in the future with what we have left, which is hard, you know, to go from 5 to 3 is just a dramatic change. But going forward in a positive way, and again, that stone, one of the stones represented that. And then I had one for myself, my own healing with my retirement and moving forward, and again, in a positive way in my life. And I had one for my parents too. And I did carry some of my parents' ashes with me as well, and put them in some special spots. My dad's first career was as a Spanish professor. And then he was a letter carrier, a rural mail carrier for many years. He was a good friend of Jill's, and Jill Lockins. And so he always wanted to go to Spain. He went to Mexico, but he never got to go to Spain. So I wanted him to be able to go to Spain as well. And of course, my mom would be very supportive of me doing a spiritual journey. And of course, she's got to come along with my dad, right? So I brought some of their ashes.
You can see as Karlin placed the stones there, as it zooms in, you get a little bit of a sense of how many stones are actually there. It's really, you almost have to walk up to it and get a sense of the width and the height. It's taller than I am. It's really a pretty amazing thing to see and do. And that was early one morning. It was really we left a town called Foncebadon, and And that's high up. It's an elevated city. It's almost all the way up the mountain to Cruz de Ferro. Heavy fog. I could barely see the dividers as we got out on the trail. And as we got to the Cruz de Ferro, it cleared long enough for us to be there. And pretty much as we walked away, the fog came back in, which was a bit of a challenge because it's another 7-mile walk down a washout to get to the next town after that. But a very special day, one of the most special along the route. More pictures, entering Galicia. Galicia is a Celtic region. It has a lot of similarities in bloodline to Ireland. And as you can see from the green, it looks a lot like Ireland. And I didn't capture one here, but if you put in your mind's eye what Ireland looks like, it's green pastures with tons and tons of hand-laid stone walls everywhere. That's Galicia. Of note, tons and tons of small family farms. We ran across cattle all over the place in Galicia. Sometimes there was one day we stopped for breakfast at a bar. A bar is a different animal in Spain than it is here. And as we tried to exit the bar, I was almost gored because a guy was using the one main street in this town to walk his cattle from that field to that field. And just kind of wild to watch. It almost felt like we were stepping back in time, seeing how they lived and seeing what kind of homes they lived in and what kind of countryside they lived in.
Gotta say something about the dogs too.
Oh, the dogs. I've never been around working dogs like we were on this trip. Those guys don't get paid enough. They are true professionals. One person, sometimes it was a man, sometimes it was a woman, and 3 dogs could often control a herd of about 100 cattle and do it expertly. And those cattle were afraid. I was afraid because, man, when that dog went for those cattle's hooves, they knew exactly what that dog wanted too. We saw that a number of times and just marveled at, and oh, by the way, the man or woman controlling the dogs, it was not English and it wasn't even Spanish. It was just a guttural, ooh, and the dog, okay, take it from there over there, or and don't let him in that pasture over there. It was phenomenal. Galicia was a special day for us. That monument in the upper right was another place. We deposited ashes. It just felt right. We had spent almost 2 weeks in Castilla y León, and we started the climb that day. It was our shortest walk day because it was so steep. Most of that day was at about a 30 to 35% grade hike up the side of a mountain to this town, which was one of the coolest towns on the Camino, O Sobrero. Entire town made out of ancient stone, all hand cut, all hand placed. The churches, the stores, the homes, the streets, the fences, everything. It was truly like walking back into medieval times. Very small town too. If Karlin walked, I don't know, 30 feet that way, we'd be looking down the valley we spent the last 3 days coming up. And if she walked about 20 feet that way, we'd be looking into the valley of the next 3 days, just like on the Meseta. Fantastic views that day. Very cold. That was about the coldest day we had. I think we woke up the next morning and it was like 30 degrees. Wore shorts the whole time. It was kind of fun. You guys were freezing back here. The terminus of the official Camino is Santiago, and these are just some shots as we got close to Santiago. Bottom left, crossing a huge bridge over a major river in the city of Potomarin. More shots of Karlin. Amazing trees. Karlin talked about the clouds. You'll see a picture coming up a little bit about some of the amazing clouds. We were just shocked at the amount of oak trees and the amount of maple trees, the amount of chestnut trees. And as we got deeper into Galicia, the amount of eucalyptus trees. Very forested, very beautiful. One of my favorites is the bottom right picture. That was one of our early morning starts. Didn't need the headlamps because we had a beautiful morning with a bright full moon. Arrival. This was a very emotional day. While we knew we were going to go on further, this is the end of the official Camino, and it's also where a lot of the folks we had met and talked to and walked with and made friends with were stepping off to go home. First part of Santiago is like any city, kind of industrial, kind of and then you start hearing something. That bagpiper plays from sunrise to sunset, 365 days a year, to welcome pilgrims into the main square right outside the Cathedral of Santiago. You can hear that, I don't know, 6, 10, 15 blocks away, and it starts to kind of well up inside of you. Almost there. This is coming into the square. Now,
Oh, my God,
there's the cathedral.
pretty good here. All right, I wanna go find mile marker 0. This place. What you thinking? Pretty amazing, isn't it?
It didn't look very crowded, and it wasn't for us. We arrived there on November 19th. We were in a pretty big crowd for that time of year. That's really when the flow of pilgrims is pretty low. We probably walked in a group plus a day, minus a day with us, those 3 days worth of people of about 50, and we got to see them over and over. When we arrived, some had already been there. We hung around for several hours, and other of our friends showed up. What I think is interesting is we didn't have much, but if you look at the statistics and that 500,000 people, the high point of summer around July and August, about 4,000 people a day arrive in Santiago from all the various caminos. So you could imagine on one of those days, which is a day we did not want to hike, because I don't have that many friends and I don't like walking on trails that are crowded with people. And also we don't like walking in 120-degree heat across the Meseta to arrive in Santiago in those crowds. But you can imagine how busy that place would have been on one of those days. Oh, you get to do Finisterre.
Right, I realize we're getting to the end here. Should I go
Skip that?
back? So our arrival, when we left Santiago and for the 5 days that we went to Finisterre, the end of the world, and then to Murcia, the bottom right one in, standing at mile marker 0 at the lighthouse out of Finisterre. And I also, it was a real windy day, the upper right, this little baby horse that mom was tethered, and a very strong wind and a little bit rainy. And this little horse came from a little ways away and came right up to me, just like a big dog. And I'm not around horses, so this was kind of a big deal. Our daughter loved horses though, so she was very comfortable around them. This horse just came right up to me and was very friendly. It was just kind of special. So. What did we learn on the Camino? So we learned to be present, to live in the moment, and sometimes on harder, more challenging days, I would be talking to myself, just put one foot in front of the other, just one foot in front of the other, and you'll keep getting closer to where you're going. But also just to take in with all of our senses what was happening around us, and experience that, the wind in our faces, the sounds, the beauty, the earth beneath our feet, the feeling of feeling grounded in doing that, and feeling very, very peaceful walking along. We also found that there's just so many good and kind people in the world from all over the world. That's just such a refreshing thing to see all of these wonderful people and the kindness of folks along the way. And Eric and I made some dinners together with folks in the albergues and sharing dinners together, and just the sense of unity with what everybody was doing and for their different reasons of doing it. Certainly self-confidence, being able to make a plan and to train for it and to do it, and to actually do such a big walk like that certainly is confidence building, to be able to take care of oneself even when you're feeling extremely, extremely low. And to have your eye kind of forward that it is going to pass, and keep moving in a positive direction and taking steps to move in a positive direction in your life. Also keeping it simple, having everything on our backs. Everything was in those packs. You know, our snacks, our water, our passports, and our clothes, our sleeping bag, our rain gear, and so forth. Everything was right there. And we just had to worry about going from point A to point B, and then finding food, and then going to sleep, and then waking up and doing it all over again. And a real sense that life is worth living. I mean, anybody who's experienced, you know, a big tragedy or loss can feel, and I would imagine, I know we have at times, that life isn't worth it. It's too painful. Certainly, you know, left with a real feeling that life is worth living. We met a lot of folks along the way who had gone through a lot of different types of very challenging things and tragedies and so forth as well. That's not the only thing that, you know, people would share, but certainly some tough things. And there's sort of a knowledge that, you know, things happen in life, and it helped having that community support. That community feeling that we're trying to grow together, and each individual. That's a real powerful thing, to do a walk like this and get to know other people who are trying to heal in different ways as well. And just how great walking is, how healthy it is, what a wonderful way to be able to see a country, a town, anywhere to experience walking. And we just love walking and, you know, we just look forward to doing more of it. And what you say to everybody as you walk along, when you pass them, you say, buen camino, good journey, good walk.
May you find what you seek.
May you find what you seek. Buen camino, good walk, good path, good journey. Yeah. So I'll say that to all of you.
Buen camino.
Buen camino.